So I think we're live. I had more troubles again with the camera. It looks like we're up and working now, though. And pardon me for clearing my throat. It's going to happen. We're going to be covering some information tonight on purpose, having a purpose in life, and longevity. It may sound like, what is this, a psychological channel? We're usually heavy into biology, medical science, and yeah, it's biology and medical science. We're going to wait just a couple more minutes to get started. I see we've got a lot of folks here already. I am, hello, LR, and D. Crispin, Dave in Central Florida. Now, let me just ask, nice shirt, thanks. It's actually bamboo. This shirt is, I got it on Amazon, and it's something you can, it's very healthy for the environment, evidently. Anyway, are you able to hear me? Hey, John. Please just mark if you are. Again, still having great. Thank you very much. Still having some technical challenges. We got the new webcam, and that created some challenge as well. One more minute, and we'll start. D. Crispin, loud and clear. Cat 333. Yes. Thanks for getting started with us early. So if we have time during the event tonight, I'd also like to go into something a little bit different, other than the activities on purpose and longevity. It has to do with exogenous ketones. Where I see that there's a light issue here. Let me try this. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Let me put it over here. Anyhow, I always thought these were silly, but we'll talk about those again if we get a little bit of a chance a little bit later. So thanks for joining us. We'll go ahead and get started. And the first couple of topics are going to be 2 articles out of JAMA, Journal of the AMA. And they're very articles that really struck me, and it's because of my own value system. Just very briefly, I've shared this before. I help teach our Sunday school class, and it's a United Methodist Church. I'm going to be teaching a series on Ecclesiastes. Now, again, you'd say, what has this got to do with medicine? Well, Ecclesiastes, if you don't remember it, is the book of the Bible that starts off with what Victor, oh gosh, what's Victor something's his last name? He said it's existential vacuum. And that's exactly what this means. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. That was attributed to an older King Solomon who was evidently maybe not so feeling so good about his life at that point in time. The book goes on and elaborates and gets a lot deeper. But again, what's this got to do with the purpose of this channel? This channel is helping people do away with, decrease, prevent the major killers that are killing us. Heart attack, stroke, blindness, kidney disease, all coming mostly from just a few things. 80% of it or more coming from one thing, and that is insulin resistance. So again, this is about preventive medicine. It's about preventing disability, preventing death. There have been 2 articles in the Journal of the AMA over the past 2 months about the issue of having a purpose in life and its impact on longevity. It has evidently, it does appear to have a big impact on longevity. There were 2 studies. The first one was Holocaust survivor study. It was done at Maccabee HMO in Israel. This is a big study. They looked at 39,000 Holocaust survivors, and they did a case control study. So they picked age matched, gender matched folks that had not gone through the Holocaust. Now, going through, again, experiencing 5 years of a genocidal type of activity, you're going to expect, I mean, these people got beat up. And you're going to expect a lot of health problems with these folks. And you'd also expect them to have a shorter lifespan. Actually, what they saw was this. They did have increased diabetes, insulin resistance, increased cancer rates, increased heart attack, increased several other things that are, major life-threatening diseases. But here's what here was the other side of this. The Holocaust survivors lived longer than the control group. So they were sicker, yet they lived longer. So obviously that goes into a question of, is there some sort of physical, genetic same thing that helped them survive the prison camps, did it help them survive through daily life here? Is there a reporting bias or a collection bias? Are you more likely to be involved with a study if you've been recognized as a survivor, a Holocaust survivor? Both of those are unlikely, given the fact that, again, these people were clearly sicker. They clearly had more of these dangerous chronic diseases. They actually even had more obesity, which is an interesting thing. I hope we get a chance to talk about that one a little bit more. But again, the bottom line was they survived longer. So again, the study authors said maybe it is this issue of having a purpose for life. The second study looked at people in the US. I think it was about 10,000 people. And there's a study that's been going on since 1992. It started off with, it's the Health and Retirement Survey. It took people 51 years and older and said, we're going to look and see how they measure. There's a scale, I forgot the name of it. But it's an official scale, a survey on ranking people in terms of the strength of their perceived purpose for life. And it was great in terms of the image. I wanted to show it to you, but I still can't figure out some of my, my technology here. I did record videos on both of these, and those will be coming out probably over the next month, 6 weeks. The bottom line was that there was a significant, what epidemiologists would call dose-response effect. With every curve in terms of increase on the importance of purpose to life on that score, the population lived longer. And there were 6 of them. So again, that kind of what we call dose-response curve is very, very powerful. So there does appear to be, these are not the first studies that have been done on purpose of life and longevity. In fact, there's probably been about a half dozen of them. Most of them weren't nearly so good. There was one, most of them just looked at 1 or 2 questions and tried to separate based on those. In fact, there's a term called ikigai. In English spelling, it's I-K-I-G-A-I. And that was, it's a Japanese term meaning purpose for life. And there were several studies, a couple of studies in Japan that looked at ikigai. And as many people know, Okinawa, for example, is classified as one of the blue zones, an area where people tend to live longer. One of the studies that focused on those people did use the term ikigai. So again, there does appear to be a significant positive impact on longevity in terms of having a purpose for life. One of these studies has actually gotten to the point of starting to look at, well, is this genetic? Is this something else? I mean, that was the Holocaust survivor study. And again, looking at the fact that the Holocaust survivors had more chronic diseases, not less, and the fact that they had obesity, more obesity, makes you wonder, gosh, you would think maybe it's just they were watching their health because of the purpose that they had in life. I don't even know, because of the obesity signal there. I don't even know if that's the mechanism. Maybe it's just, you don't want to die yet. I'm not sure. It's a great question though, and thanks for listening to that intro. One last thing, real quick pop quiz. One question. What's my ikigai, my purpose in life? Obviously, I've retired again, and this is my purpose in life. I'm enjoying the heck out of doing this social media and making this information available to people. And again, this used to be available, but only to people that could afford their own airplane. I mean, it was very, very expensive type of information. We're now working again to make it available to more and more people. I've seen 3 patients this afternoon. We've opened the practice back up, and I've got all the time in the world. So give us a call if you're interested in seeing us. Now back to some of the folks here. VK Banks, yes, you can hear me. Bart Robinson, hey Doc, good to see you. Looking forward to the chat. Okay. D. Crispin, loud and clear, great. Steve, is it Steve? You're going to have to tell us how to pronounce that. Is it Sapel, Sapili, or Sapel, or Sapele? Anyhow, good to see you, Steve. Hi, Doc. I hear you loud and clear. And Steve, I think is, I don't know if you're a physician, PA, NP. I think Steve has some clinical background, or it certainly appears that way from some of the comments that I've seen. VK Banks from Arlington, Texas, and Cat 333 in Plano, Texas. Cool shirt. Thanks again, Bart. Edward K. O'Brien. Frankel, thank you so much. I have so many problems with word finding. Viktor Frankl. Now, this is an interesting, I can't help but go a little bit deeper. Viktor Frankl was the person that talked about existential vacuum, vanity. Everything's vanity. King Solomon was supposed to be an old man saying everything's vanity. That is a major reason why a lot of people do not like, in terms of Bible studies, they don't like to do Ecclesiastes, because you are staring straight in the face of potential death. You're staring straight in the face of saying, okay, what is the purpose? Why would I fight this? In fact, one of Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist. One of his favorite therapeutic interview components was to say, it was sort of a surprise effect, but to say, so why do you not commit suicide? And what would happen, Frankl actually, even before he himself was taken prisoner in the concentration camps, was a psychiatrist with a major focus in this area. He had already started saving many lives in Austria, just coming right out of medical school. How did he do it? He did it by starting a suicide prevention program. During the exam time at the end of the year in Austria, there was always a blip, a significant uptick of students committing suicide. He got placed in a public health position in a suicide prevention program for women in Vienna, and had a huge impact just coming right out of the blocks. That was his passion, his focus for the rest of his life. He was actually working on a manuscript for this, for a book in this area, and a book which I think after he got out of the concentration camps became Man's Search for Meaning. It's a great book, by the way, if you have any interest in what we've been talking about the first 10 minutes here. Man's Search for Meaning is Viktor Frankl's story that he told. He was Jewish, and he got put in the concentration camps, and he described the years there, and the difference in what were called the capos, the prisoners that were set one level higher to keep an eye on the other prisoners and to provide more discipline, versus other people who were there to help. And his perspective was, if you had a bigger purpose in life than yourself, you were much more likely to survive the concentration camps. And that's what pardon me if that's a spoiler, but that's what that book is about, Man's Search for Meaning. He went on to found a type of psychiatric therapy called logotherapy. And again, the major focus of this logotherapy was to look at, what is your purpose for living? And once you have that, then again, build on that for therapy. So thank you again, Edward K. O'Brien. I get so frustrated with my word finding problems. I've been working on just that series this week, and I couldn't remember Frankel's last name. PJ St. Pierre, yes. Elisa Fry, you never fail to help us grow scientifically, intellectually, and purposefully. Thank you very much, Alyssa. Pamela Amos, Albany, Georgia here. Great. I'm a South Carolina boy, and my grandma used to live in, I can't remember, I think Albany's near the mountains in Georgia. Her family lived in somewhere in the mountains there too. I'm new, first time here. What a blessing. Thank you again, PJ. Dr. Whoops, this just jumped. Gosh. Blank name. It's probably purpose. The more you have a dedicated goal in mind, the more willpower and general positive mental health you have. Yes. John Panazzo, is it purpose or mental focus? How to differentiate between the two? That is obviously a great question. Again, it's becoming clear that there's an undeniable association between having a strong purpose or something there in the mental health side and survival. Again, it's not the fact that the Holocaust survivors had more chronic diseases, including obesity. Makes you wonder about, maybe it's not just health activities or health habits. Uriel Wong, thyroid peroxidase antibodies. What to do? Thank you. Uriel, that's a great question. Different for a different video, different subject, different time. I've done a few things on thyroid, mostly looking at reverse T3. Most people think that reverse T3 is it's one of those pseudoscience things that a lot of wacky doctors on YouTube look at. And the reality is that reverse T3 does have scientific backing. The question is, how often is T3 significant? And your question is actually even different. Yours has to do with peroxidase antibodies. Again, different issue. Steve Mitchum, I had a chest CT which showed no plaque. Should I also get a CIMT? A great question for what we do in terms of heart attack and stroke prevention. And the reality is, yeah, but chest CT is not going to show it. A chest CT is looking at the entire anatomy of the chest. What you want to do is hone in on the arteries. So maybe you're talking, so if you're talking about a full chest CT, that's not going to help you very much at all. I'm guessing you're talking about a coronary calcium, which is a CT type of activity, or a CT type of study. And the coronary calcium, I don't use those very often. Here's the balance between CIMT, carotid intima media thickness test, and a chest or a coronary artery, carotid intima media thickness test up here in the in the neck, and coronary artery calcium score, CACS, down in the chest. The CACS has radiation, and most people focus on that. That's really not a significant issue, but it is enough of an issue to where people don't want to do it every year, starting with a young person. You get no radiation with the carotid ultrasound. It's an ultrasound technology. So you can do that every year, and we do suggest doing that every year, especially once you get to middle age. I'd suggest it for young people as well, because the younger you are, the more impact you can have with a tiny change in behavior and health lifestyle. Here's the biggest difference between the coronary CT or calcium score and the carotid ultrasound. You can actually see plaque on the carotid ultrasound, even if it's soft. And really, soft plaque is the plaque that's dangerous. I actually had a patient, I think it was last January, February time period. He came to us with a calcium score, and he was having symptoms. I've got access to a few people that are really, really good at reading some of these images, and they were actually able to take a look at it and saw a lot of evidence that he had soft plaque going on, and sure enough, he did. And you're just not going to see that on a coronary calcium score. All you're going to see is calcium in the coronary arteries. What that indicates is you've gone through the inflammation stage and you've started to cool off. This is a cyclical process. You start getting inflammation, you start laying down plaque, your immune system starts attacking it, making it soft, and that's when you're really in danger. Once it starts to cool down, you start seeing flecks of calcium in the plaque, and then it starts to calcify completely. That's stable. That's not going to leak out. It's not going to cause a clot, a heart attack, or a stroke. So now, then you may ask, well, but there is an increasing, if you have increased calcium on the calcium score, it does show increased risk, doesn't it? Yes. Now, but calcium's stable. Yes, but think about it. If this is a process that tends to start middle-aged, and now with the obesity epidemic earlier and earlier, and it's a cyclical process, what does it mean when you see a lot more calcium, even if calcium does indicate stable plaque? More calcium means you've laid down more plaque, you've gone through more and more cycles of this inflammation and cooling process. I'm trying to remember to look at the camera. I keep looking down there again. I am what I am, as Popeye said. So the fact that you're getting more calcium in the coronary arteries indicates that you've been through more of these cycles, you've laid down more plaque, and you've gone through more dangerous episodes where you've got soft plaque. It doesn't tell you if you have soft plaque going on at that point, which is the major danger point. So on the other hand, the carotid ultrasound, I keep doing this, it's because where they look at the carotid artery using an ultrasound wand, that will tell you not only if you have plaque, it'll also tell you if it's soft and or hard or calcified, and it will also give you some other clarity. And in addition, you can do this every year and monitor your progress in terms of have my lifestyle interventions actually created some changes. You can see that in a couple of videos, my video where I talk about reversing my own plaque from arterial age of 73 or something like that, back down to about 53. So a lot of information on CT. Blank name, CIMT is more thorough. Yes, very good. But don't start scaring yourself with tests you might not need. Okay. Well, there is a point there. Paula Sullivan, new listener from Tennessee. Thank you for generously giving so much cardio information. You're very, very welcome. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this is my legacy purpose in life. I've got some personal goals, family goals and stuff like that, but my legacy purpose is this. I mean, so many of us are dying from this process and we don't even know it. Even the CDC, as conservative as they are, and they are very conservative, is crystal clear that, and it's on their websites, 90% of people that have insulin resistance don't know it. And 3/4 of strokes, again, conservatively, according to the CDC, are preventable. So we've just got tides. I mean, what is it? I can't remember the number of people that died in Vietnam. Obviously, that just shook this country to the core. But we seem to be okay with the fact that every 2 weeks, as many people die from this process as died in the whole that whole multi-year war in Vietnam. So again, there's we need to focus as a culture. Uriel Wong, NP, thank you. I think you're saying you're an NP. Thanks for joining us. Joe Burak, another question regarding CIMT. Distinguish between arterial age being well below actual age, while discrete plaques shows some progression at the same time with Crestor and low current inflammation. So what Joe Burak, I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly, is talking about is there are two major ways of looking at risk. And both of these, there's been a lot of research around CIMT. You'll also find it under IVUS, intravascular ultrasound. There's been a lot of research about that and what it tells you in terms of prediction of risk. There are two major areas that give you the prediction of risk. And this is the explanation I used before, and it's maybe not that good, but we've got plenty of videos that cover that. One is what's called the coronary common carotid artery thickness, or the CIMT, the actual thickness. It's the amount of LDL, what we used to call bad cholesterol, that's been deposited between the lining of the artery and the muscle layer, the intima and the media. And the thicker that gets, the more you've got this process of damaging that endothelium and creating plaque. What I'm showing here is what we call the mean max. And what does that mean? So again, this is like looking at the topography of a topography, land topography. This is the beach. These are the mountains. And the first one, arterial age, tells us how much the whole thing has risen. So that gives us arterial age. But then you also have risk associated with having what we call discrete plaques. And a discrete plaque is any plaque area where it's 1.3 millimeters or more. The mean max means the mean or average of these maximal or peak areas. So you take the top 6 peak areas and average them out, and that's another area. That's another way of helping us understand risk for heart attack and stroke. And again, as I've mentioned several times, there's yet a third thing that you can get from CIMT, and that is it a soft or a hard plaque? So, Vinny C. Hi, I have a CAC score of 211. My concern is the CAC, coronary artery calcium score, will increase by 25% per year. Should I be trying to reduce the CAC? How do I do that? Well, that is a long discussion on how you do that. The bottom line is CAC rarely reverses. John Lorscheider actually accomplished a reversal, and we've got a video on that, how I decreased my coronary calcium score by 40%. So you can look that video up and you'll see what John did. He lost over 30 pounds. He was on a statin. Huge lifestyle changes, cut his carbs way down. He went from, I think he said he went from a glucose level peaking up over 200, close to 300, to where he was routinely, he was managing his carbs such that it was staying less than 100, 110. So mostly lifestyle. So it's lifestyle, lifestyle, lifestyle. A lot of people focus on medications. A lot of people focus on supplements. You can't supplement or medicate your way out of a bad lifestyle. But there is a place for supplements and there's a place for medications. So that's the generic 50,000-foot view of that question, Benny. B. Joe, do you have a recommendation for food diary app to correlate foods eaten with symptoms afterward? No, I don't. It's a good question, but I don't, B. Joe. Thanks for asking. Rob T07, hi doc, what are the symptoms of soft plaque? Absolutely none. No symptoms. This is a silent killer. You don't get up today and say, you know what? I feel like I got plaque. You don't even know. You never even feel plaque itself until you have soft plaque, and some of that squeezes back through the intima, hits the artery wall, and that causes a clot. Some of those inflammatory things, cytokines, other things like that, will cause the flowing blood to form a clot. And if it's big enough and it goes to the heart, it's a heart attack. If it's big enough and it goes to the brain, it's a stroke. And if it's microscopic, just a few hundred cells at the time, and it goes on for hours, days, months, years, decades, it's going to be congestive heart failure, dementia, blindness, etc. So those are the symptoms, but you don't feel it. You don't have any immediate symptoms from soft plaque. D. Crispin 1, do it like you do it. We appreciate the simple authenticity of your videos and the complexity of the issues you discuss versus a slick video production. I do appreciate that greatly, D. Crispin. And that's always been my perspective. When I started this a couple of years ago, I said, I'm going to get pilloried. I know that YouTube is a rough environment and lots of haters out there, but the bottom line is there's information that I wanted to make available for people that wanted it. And I was relying on content. And it's true, content is king. So thank you very much for recognizing that. I do have to get used to the haters out there. VK Banks, does citrulline and arginine have an effect on this plaque? I actually did a video probably a year and a half ago. It's one of my more popular videos. It tends to stay at the top. There is some evidence that citrulline and arginine help. Is it world-beating evidence? Would I depend on that alone? No, but again, there is some mild evidence that it does help. Not quite so much in terms of actually having a permanent impact on the plaque. It's more of a short-term type of impact. Steve Mitchum, thank you, Doc. Euro Wong, no problem. Equals NP. Okay, thanks. N-methyltransferase, good to see you. I don't believe in using CACE, a coronary artery calcium score, to dictate treatment decisions. Imagine that you live in a high-risk neighborhood. Everyone who lives there warns you that this is a high crime area. Will you wait until your windows are broken or you're a victim of home invasion before investing in extra security? I think I get the logic. And the bottom line is this. I've used coronary artery calcium score half a dozen times, not very much, yet I get, gosh, hundreds of CIMTs. Here's the one downside to CIMT. It's because of the necessity of getting what we call a good interrogation, the ultrasound tech wanting to find the exact angles here. You need to get a very good, well-trained CIMT tech. I actually saw a couple of patients. You know, most of my um, patients over the past few months have been what we call patient-directed labs. So the patients are they go and get their, excuse me, their own CIMT, their own labs, and quite often I'll have patients that come in with what's called, it's basically just a an ultrasound. Those are very common. The ultrasound will just tell you, is there any impact on flow? Had a couple of patients today that had something sort of in between. They had a CIMT that actually indicated arterial age, but they still, to I can't remember who brought it up. To somebody's point earlier, it was not a complete CIMT in that it didn't show the mean max, those mountains, so we could, you know, get a better focus on just how many discrete plaques do we have, how big are they soft, are they starting to get calcified, whatever. So that is the major challenge with CIMT, actually accessing one. Which brings up a good point. If you haven't got access, if you haven't seen our video, um, most of my work is with a fellow named Todd Eldridge, Cardio Risk. He's a good person to bring into this space because his original training was a PhD, a doctorate in epidemiology focused on quality assurance. So he does a great job, actually the best job of anybody I've seen in terms of being able to deal with this quality issue in terms of trying to make sure that what this tech sees and shows this year is comparable to the next year and the next year and the next, or what this tech sees versus another tech. He's got some great systems for assuring that. Okay. Oh my goodness. Nomad Loan. Sugar was 456. I can't get it down under 149 with metformin. I'm only 32. I would not. I've seen, obviously, I've seen blood sugars in the 700 and 800s, but people are not healthy when they're in that. I mean, they usually need immediate help. Once you get over 300, even 200, you really need to. You need to have somebody take a look at that, Nomad Lane. And thank you very much for sharing that. And again, only 32. You know, the question is it type 1 or type 2? You begin, you know, at age 32 and those kind of blood sugar levels, you clearly begin to expect type 1. Type 1 is an inability. Usually, we don't understand the mechanisms for type 1 as well as type 2. Actually, we don't understand the mechanisms for either one of them that well. But type 1 does appear to be probably an autoimmune type thing where the beta cells, which make insulin, actually they lose the ability. And the theory about autoimmunity is that maybe you have antibodies that attack those beta cells. In some places, that's been clearly documented. In most cases, it's not that clear. Type 2 diabetes is not an inability to make insulin. Type 2 diabetes is where the cells, mostly muscle cells and liver cells, which usually pull sugar out of the blood. Sugar is, it can burn you. It burns the inside of the arteries. So it's not good to have that there. And that's what insulin's for, to help you pull that sugar out of the blood and into the muscle and liver cells where it's no longer causes danger. Especially as we age, but also the more fat mass that we have, the more fat cells, and the bigger those fat cells get, they also impact insulin resistance as well. Nomad Lone went on to say normal weight. Yeah, that's that's exactly the question I was wondering about, just a family history. So yeah, that does make you wonder about your family history. Thank you again for sharing that. And again, please get somebody to help you with that. VK Banks, isn't vitamin K involved in calcium management in the cardiovascular system? It's a great question. We discussed vitamin K, I believe, last week. I've got a couple of videos. They haven't come out yet. I think maybe one of them has. I did some the actual the K2. So K1 is a vitamin that helps you in the clotting mechanism. It's got nothing to do with this. But there's another vitamin K, vitamin K2, and I think it was discovered by Bruce Ames. Bruce Ames is a nutritionist, I think in one of the California schools. He's the mentor for Rhonda Patrick, who you'll see on the internet a lot. She's got some good stuff out there. But K2 actually does, I mean, K2 was almost a fad for a few years there, and it's still percolating along. I took a look at it a couple of years ago, and it really didn't seem to be that impressive. And I really didn't give it a fair shake. What I did was I went straight to randomized clinical trials. And there are some randomized clinical trials. The Rotterdam study, for example, is the first thing you'll see. And you'll see people quote that it made a positive impact. Now, here's the thing. Pardon me, somebody was trying to call in. Even the Rotterdam study, which is one of the ones that the K2 proponents really push, was not that convincing. There is no convincing randomized clinical trials which would support K2. So I actually didn't focus that much on K2 for a while. Then I happened to, about a month ago, read I can't remember the title of the book. It was written by a female Canadian nutritionist with a doctorate on K2. And she got maybe a little bit too deep and too long in terms of environmentalism and I mean, I'm okay with, I'm a major proponent of environmentalism, but I tend to focus on science in terms of what helps the human body. And so, but I did take a longer look at that K2 book, and I began to go back and look deeper at the science. There's some very interesting science out there. In fact, there's no question that vitamin K2 has to do with what we call carboxylation of some very important enzymes. One of them called osteocalcin. And osteocalcin not only, it has a couple of these enzymes, including osteocalcin, have a lot to do with causing deposition of calcium on bones, pulling calcium on bones, and not depositing calcium in soft tissues. So actually, there's a lot of rationale there, even if the randomized clinical trials don't really show it. There's a lot of new studies that are in the works. We'll probably hear a lot over the next couple of years about K2 and calcification. The final thing that's very interesting about that research is this. There's no question in the science that osteocalcin is also very much related to insulin resistance. What that relationship is just not clear yet, but there's something going on with K2. Anyhow, after those, doing a series that I did last week, which will come out over the next month or so, I got some natto, which is awful tasting stuff, and I got some K2 supplementation, so I'm back to supplementing with K2. John Panazzo, not all CIMTs are created equal. Isn't that the truth? Again, I like with the patients I saw today, I had to say, you know, I can read what I can read out of this CIMT, but there's a lot that I can't read. EDMC 5876, what is your opinion on catheter ablation? Oh, that is a very interesting topic that we haven't talked about in a while. I've got a whole series on catheter ablation is where you actually cook some areas in the heart. You take a catheter, usually up through the groin, go in through the right heart, punch through the what's now the wall between the right and left heart, the foramen valley, punch through that, and then go over and burn a couple of areas. Now, why would you do that? It's for atrial fib. And what's going on with atrial fib is we know for the most part where most of the nidus for the um, uh, for the what we call the aberrant conduction, or it's not really aberrant conduction. It's the starting point of the bad or incorrect uh, pulse, electrical pulse, which puts the whole atria into just a fibrillation. It's totally disorganized. We know that comes from the areas around the pulmonary veins or arteries. You name those backwards. It's the blood coming in from the lungs that has been oxygenated into the left atria. So they go in and they just they cauterize or burn the tissue in circles around those areas. Quite often ablation helps. However, I don't know, look up my videos on atrial fib. I've got it, and I've got maybe 24 videos on atrial fib out there. I did see a cardiologist, an interventional guy, about this. I had actually diagnosed my own using a thing called iCardia, and I would recommend that you consider that, especially if you suspect that you have atrial fib. It's by far the most common dysrhythmia that we have. You tend to see it a lot more as we age. You tend to see it with insulin resistance, with some of the other chronic diseases. Back to the bottom line, I did not get an ablation. For the most part, ablations, guys that do it, really get into it. And some of this gets back to that thing of, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. In other words, if you're a surgeon, everything looks surgical. If you're an interventional cardiologist, everything looks like intervention. I can fix that. And I'll admit, I've got some of that bias myself. You see it in my own videos. I'm a prevention medicine doc. I taught this at Hopkins. I've taught doctors and managed huge medical staff, actually thousands of doctors. I focus on prevention, and I actually haven't had any episodes of my paroxysmal atrial fib since I lost. It's really predictable for me, and it is for a lot of patients. Weight, poor sleep, and high blood pressure. Those three things tend to trip off paroxysms of atrial fib, if you have paroxysmal atrial fib. So maybe I've gone on a bit about that. If we have other questions about paroxysmal atrial fib, we can talk about them. I hope that was helpful, though. Bottom line is, typically with an ablation, maybe 30%. Some guys that do better, up to maybe 2/3 success rate. But then the success rate, you get it done, you improve it, the atrial fib goes away, and then it comes back 3 months later, but they still classified that as a success. So even when you read about success rates, beware, be skeptical, and see how long that, quote, success lasted. Craig Larson, Idaho, thanks for doing what you do. Is it possible to cure insulin resistance with just fasting, or do we manage it? Actually, a great way of phrasing that question. There's been a lot of research on Prolon, the fasting mimicking diet, and some other types of fasting, which clearly show that you get an improvement in insulin resistance with fasting. They actually showed in lab animals. There's a thing, I think it's streptomycin or streptozocin. There's a chemical that you can give lab animals and wipe out their beta cells and create a model of a type 1 diabetes. Um, Longo in his research actually, actually did that and um, put these lab animals through, they were mice, put them through episodes of the mouse version of Proline, or the mouse version of the fasting mimicking diet, actually got um, their pancreatic function back. Now, they've tried to do not similar studies. They're not going to wipe out any humans' pancreas or beta cells with streptozotocin, but they've done it done similar types trials with humans, mostly with type 2 diabetes that I know of. I'm not aware of type 1 diabetes trials with it. You get improvement, but you don't get a cure. It doesn't. So here's the thing, and I have suspicion that a lot of it may just be the weight loss usually associated with fasting. You lose 10 pounds, there's no question, almost everybody that has insulin resistance, if you lose weight, you will have a positive impact on that. Now, there's also evidence that fasting has much deeper, much broader effect than just weight loss. For example, it's been demonstrated multiple times that you get decreased inflammatory markers, true decrease in inflammation, the inflammation that causes risk for heart attack and stroke and dementia. You get you get big increases in stem cells. So again, we know that there's a huge amount of promise for the future in stem cells, and we're already opening sometimes that Pandora's box, but a huge area for opportunity. We do know that fasting is a way to cause the human body to get a huge increase in stem cells in a natural way, which is obviously going to be much safer. So the bottom line is you manage it. Oh my goodness, Fennell Hicks. Fennell commented and then retracted it. You're probably going to. Good to see you, Fennell. Thanks for joining. Ramsey Rays, good day, Doc. Ford, is it okay for eating white rice in my weight resistance day? I work out 3 days a week. White rice has carbs. There's no question about that. And a lot of my diabetic patients react big time to rice. I react, my own body, I react to white rice. But you're talking about muscle training and evidently doing a lot of it. Resistance training. So this brings up the issue of exercise and insulin resistance. There's you hear stories, and you hear it multiple times, that the best schedule for overall health for exercise is usually about 3 times per week. Let's put that comment aside for a minute and go into some of the other research about insulin resistance and exercise. So we used to think it was long, slow distance, LSD. It does help. There's no question about that, and you do need to have a base of long, slow distance. However, the vast majority of the research over the past 5 years, even a decade, has been showing the huge importance of high intensity interval training and resistance training. So if you're not doing that, that's one of the areas where I end up spending a lot of time. Several patients this week and last week as well. They'd gotten the diet thing down pretty well, but they were and they did some walking, but they were not doing significant interval training or weight resistance training. Here's the thing. It does appear that muscle activity, resistance training, interval training, it opens up. I mean, you can do this if you do a I was promised myself I wasn't going to do this again today. But if you get what if this was after a meal, if you get a continuous monitor like this, oh wait a minute, I'm supposed to decrease the um, oh gosh, I can't display and brightness, decrease that. So if there's a button under my shirt, I could I don't have a short sleeve on, so I can't show you. But if you, it's called continuous glucose monitoring. And here's the bottom line. Pardon me for taking all those digressions, but let me go back and summarize and give you the punchline. That resistance training is opening up other channels within the cell wall that pull blood sugar in out of the blood where it's dangerous, back into the cell where it's safe. You can actually trace the fact that muscles, when they exercise, will actually decrease your blood sugar. For example, if you have type 2 diabetes or an insulin resistance and you take a carb break, you go out and have a pizza and beer with your kids or something, if you go out and take a walk and you're doing this kind of continuous glucose monitoring, you can see it take the top right off of that glucose spike. Here's the final endpoint about this issue with exercise. The intensive exercise, resistance training, and high intensity intervals has actually been shown to last up to 48 hours. So this takes us back to that original statement of, wonder why most the research around exercise optimizes around 3 times per week. It very well could be this issue that you're getting a significant insulin effect there. So thank you for your patience as I winded through some free associations on one of my favorite topics. And if you have questions about this, this is called Freestyle Libre. I've got a lot of videos on it. And it's a great way of knowing exactly what's going on with your blood sugar. Ron Wells, thank you for your help. The human body is complex. Yeah, and unfortunately, sometimes we make it a lot more complex. But yes, if you want to do the right thing for your body, you need to have some information. It's better to be informed. The best patient is the informed patient. Methyltransferase, Dr. Brewer, the way you pointed to your carotid artery reminded me of something my maternal grandmother said. According to Sufi saints, God is closer to you than your carotid arteries. That is a very interesting statement. Wonder why they thought about, well, that's a very interesting statement. Thank you for sharing that in methyltransferase. Bijo, so you advise the daily aspirin to guard against a clot if you have a plaque. Another really big question. Is anybody, let me know, make comments if you've read the Esprit or Ascend trials. Those are both trials that came out over the past summer, fall time period. And here was what the press takeaway was on the Esprit and Ascend trials. You shouldn't take aspirin anymore. The risk outweighs the benefit. Not so fast. Actually, what they did show was that there was still some benefit to aspirin. And you just brought up, I think that, what was the question, Bijo just brought up the critical point. If you have plaque, if you go back and you look at those two studies and you listen to a doc quote them, or you listen to some reporter quote them, they all say it's not worth it anymore. It's more dangerous than it is worth it. Ask them if the people that were taking the aspirin actually had documented plaque. And the answer is no. They just took people that had risk, but they didn't look for specific plaque. So I never did recommend aspirin if you don't have plaque. I never did recommend statins if you don't have plaque. But if you do have plaque, we know that your body has already gone through inflammation. It's already laid down plaque. Um, Usually when it starts laying it down, it's going to be soft. So, and we also know that this is a cyclical process. So we know that, all that has to happen is you get under some sort of stress, your cortisol level kicks up, your blood sugar levels kick up, your plaques that you already have there start softening again. So you could get back into an inflammation type process and soft plaque very quickly without warning. So yes, I do recommend aspirin. And I know there's a lot of statin haters out there, and I'm going to get a lot of abuse. But yes, I do recommend statins if you have plaque as well. Steve Mitchum, Dr. Brewer, have you done or plan to do any videos on the subject of autophagy? Yes, I have. And this brings up 2 points. So go in, Google Ford Brewer autophagy. I did a whole series on it, and I got into mTOR. Put mTOR in that Google search as well. Again, there's a researcher named David, I can't remember his name right now. He's at MIT and Harvard, and he's done a lot of the world's research on in this area, getting closer to autophagy. And I didn't bring up the term autophagy at all when we were talking about fasting before, but it's a big issue around fasting as well. There's actually even a black market supplement, longevity supplement. I'm blanking on the name for it right now. They found it in some fungus or something out in the Easter Islands. And there's a little plaque if you go out on the Easter Islands. I know all this because I found that out when I was doing research for that series on autophagy. That medicine's actually used in cancer treatment. A lot of people are taking it because they think that it has a lot to do, and it does. There's clearly scientific evidence that it has to do with autophagy and decreasing inflammation. However, I think there are good reasons that it's still black market and it's not quite ready for prime time. Rapamycin, you'll hear. I think it's rapamycin, but there's another term that they use for it, the black market term. So yes, very familiar with that. Peter Vafaides. I know I'm butchering that last name, but I've got a last name that a lot of people butcher as well. Which exercise is preferable for insulin resistance, fasted or fed cardio? Again, cardio is something we always thought for the past 20 years was the big thing, and it does help. You do need a base of it. But as I said, high intensity intervals and resistance training is really becoming, the most common thing I see is people didn't add that back into their exercise routine, and that is a major gap. I think, however, Peter, that your focus is on whether it's fasted or fed. I haven't seen a lot of science in the area. I know that if you go out and do fasted exercise, it's tougher on your metabolism. It's a bigger challenge, and therefore likely to result in more improvement. You just have to make sure that you're safe when you do it, because fasting and then doing intensive exercise, you just got to make sure you're safe when you do it. The time has passed very quickly. Didn't get to nearly all the comments. We've had a lot of participation. I really appreciate your interest, and I appreciate the thumbs up. We got a lot of thumbs up there too. I appreciate that, and please, if you would, share it, because when humans share this information with each other, the algorithm in YouTube notices that, and it decides this is important information that humans will like. None of us as individuals can share like the algorithm at YouTube. So please share it. We also have some other things. If you'd like to see me as a patient, I've got patients all over the world, licenses in about 40 states of the country, have helped run several telemedicine groups, know the ins and outs of how to get that done. And more than anything else, we are continuing to work on ways that you can get this for less and less of your money and your time. The ultimate being the free videos. One other comment, and I'll leave us. When you asked me about autophagy, I started to bring up this issue of indexing. I sent out a few and put a few outros on some of the videos where we talked about sign up for the YouTube for our YouTube community, Ford Brewer PrevMed, and we will help you in terms of finding those videos. There are two things that we've done, and they didn't actually come out with the community yet. The first one is that Kim, we now have a media manager. She's been with us for 2 months. Her name is Kim Hermosa. She has started to improve the playlists within YouTube. So if you don't know how to get into playlists on YouTube, start taking a look, start learning a little bit more about that. I'd actually be surprised if there's not a specific playlist on autophagy. Clearly, I think there's one. I think there's one on that. I know there's one on reversal of plaque, and autophagy is a major part of reversal of plaque. The second item that we're doing in terms of indexing is there's a fellow named Quanticus on the forum. He's an engineer by background and trade, but he's also got a lot of background in business and YouTube. He's a technical guy. And he started indexing our videos. He's actually put an index, one of the preliminary indexes or indices, on our forum. How do you get to the forum? Just go to our website and click. Right up at the top, there's a thing that says forum. Thank you again for your interest. Let me see if I can figure out how to turn this thing off.